Energy Central webcast entitled Scott Madden's Energy Industry Update, The Distance. Now I'd like to hand the floor over to Kevin Hernandez, partner with Scott Madden, to kick things off. Kevin, welcome to the event. You have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, PJ. It's nice to be with you again. Next slide, please. So as PJ mentioned, I'm Kevin Hernandez. I'm a partner with Scott Madden in our energy practice, where I focus primarily on the grid edge space. Next slide. So briefly, a little bit about us. As many of you know, Scott Madden is a general management consulting firm. We specialize in the energy industry. And our areas of focus, as you can see here, include a couple things: generation, T&D, grid edge, rates and regulatory, natural gas, as well as energy corporate services. We primarily serve the electric and gas utilities and spend most of our time really focused on helping our clients navigate really a variety of challenges, many of which, as you can imagine, are related to the energy transition, particularly these days. Scott Madden's Energy Industry Update, which we publish twice a year, is one way we try to keep our clients and really the broader energy community informed on what we see as the most important issues facing the industry. And we're happy to be able to share some of those thoughts with you today. Our current edition, which we've called The Distance, when we kind of took stock of where we are with the energy transition, it seemed to us that although we've made a lot of progress over the last few years, there's still really a long ways to go in some areas. And many of the technologies and the policies that were promised to usher in this, this wave of change, some of those continue to be kind of stuck in development. So today we're going to talk about three of those things. First, the challenge that really the tremendous amounts of investment in the energy system will have on affordability, particularly that for low-income customers. We're also going to talk about recent FERC orders and their potential impact on transmission development, which is, as you know, is a key enabler of the energy transition. And then lastly, we're going to spend some time talking about long-duration energy storage and its long-awaited promise to revolutionize the industry. So with that, I'd like to get started. Next slide, please. So to lead us off, Jon Nichols will lead our discussion on low-income affordability. And Jon, I'll just hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jon Nichols. I'm a senior associate at Scott Madden, where I primarily work on rates and regulation. Next slide, please. We can go to the next one, please. All right, so as we begin this conversation on affordable rate design, it's important to first set the stage by acknowledging the changes reshaping the energy industry. So both electric and gas utilities are facing an evolving landscape that requires significant investments, which is leading to higher cost of service and really placing a lot of upward pressure on rates. One major factor shaping this transformation is the growing number of policy objectives that utilities are expected to meet. So things like decarbonization goals or policies around reliability and resiliency are reshaping utility operations and requiring substantial investment in new systems as well as upgrades to existing infrastructure. And then on top of this, utilities are adapting to shifting customer expectations. Today's customers expect not only cleaner energy, but greater reliability and more control over their energy use. So meeting these demands requires more investments in new programs and infrastructure to enhance the customer experience. So expanded policy objectives, new technologies, and shifting customer expectations, along with just the traditional responsibilities of providing safe and reliable power, are really converging to place significant upward pressure on rates. So as we'll see on the coming slides, utilities and regulators are recognizing this challenge that rising costs are posing, and they're addressing this challenge through rate design. Next slide, please. So the real-world impacts of investments and the rate requests we saw on the previous slide are causing regulators to increase their focus on energy affordability, particularly for low-income customers. And the quotes on this slide highlight statements from regulators who have recently implemented rate design programs or structures aimed at improving affordable energy access. So for example, in Massachusetts, after the Commission issued an order regarding gas decarbonization, the Commission recognized that decarbonizing its gas utilities may lead to higher costs on ratepayers. And so they opened a subsequent proceeding to examine solutions to address energy burden and affordability. And in New York, the Commission has noted that affordability is, in their words, equally as important as advancing clean energy objectives. And they've set a goal for low-income customers to pay no more than 6% of their annual household income towards energy bills. And so with this growing recognition of the need to support low-income customers, regulators and utilities are taking significant steps to create more affordable rate structures and programs, which we will see on the next slide. So regulators and utilities have increasingly turned to rate design to reduce the financial pressures that low-income households are facing. One solution we're seeing is income-based discounts, which may provide flat or tiered discounts to eligible households. So for example, Duke Energy in North Carolina recently passed a program that provides a flat credit of up to $42 per month for eligible households. And we've seen a number of recent tiered discount programs approved in states like Massachusetts and Connecticut. And the second rate design solution is percentage of income payment plans, which are a more tailored solution that cap a customer's monthly payment to a fixed percentage of their household income. We've also seen a number of PIP programs recently approved in states like Colorado and Virginia. And finally, a third rate design solution is income-based fixed charges. We've specifically seen this in California, and this structure is designed to provide bill savings in the form of reduced fixed charges for low-income customers. In most cases, these rate designs address affordability concerns by targeting customer energy burdens. Energy burden is a commonly used metric to evaluate affordability, and it's typically defined as the percentage of customer income spent on energy bills. But the effectiveness of each of these designs varies in managing customer energy burden. So, for example, the percentage of income payment plans, they are tied to a customer's energy burden, so they'll be able to achieve a target affordability level. But income-based discounts are based on an average energy burden. So some customers will overpay and some customers will underpay relative to that target level. And a key theme of these low-income rate designs that you'll see is there's no perfect solution. Each rate design comes with trade-offs, particularly in regard to balancing targeted relief with administrative complexity and just the need for funding. Each state has unique administrative frameworks that impact things like data sharing, enrollment, levels of funding, and more broadly, just the cost that it takes to administer these programs. So on the next few slides, we'll take a closer look at how these rate designs are being implemented and how they can be tailored to meet the specific needs of different jurisdictions. Next slide, please. So in September 2024, the Massachusetts Commission approved a 5-tier discount rate structure proposed by National Grid. And this rate proposal was in response to a Commission directive to provide more equitable discounts and mitigate rate shock for customers that transition from low to moderate income. Prior to this new rate design, National Grid had a flat discount of 32% on an eligible customer's monthly bill. But there were challenges with enrollment and eligibility, and third-party evaluations found that low-income households in Massachusetts had energy burdens that were around 8% on average, compared to less than 2% for non-low-income households. And then when looking at the lowest income households, or the households that earn between 0 to 100% of the federal poverty level, those households spend up to a fifth of their income on energy bills. So Massachusetts was looking for a more targeted discount approach to lower the financial burden on these customers. And its tiered proposal developed a solution aimed at keeping the electric energy burden for low-income customers at 3.1%, which also reflects the median household energy burden across the U.S. One other thing to note for this rate design, National Grid proposed and the Commission approved a performance incentive tied to this rate design, tied to the enrollment level for this rate. And they had an enrollment target of about 5,000 new low-income customers per year. And it's a symmetrical incentive, so National Grid may earn up to $500,000 per year for exceeding the enrollment target, or they may incur a penalty of about $500,000 a year for missing the target. So overall, this tiered rate design provides a higher discount at lower incomes and then reduces the discount as income levels rise. So while the rate structure itself is more complex than the previous flat discount, it provides more targeted assistance. Next slide, please. And so on this slide, we see a slightly different approach to reducing energy burden. Back in 2022, the California legislature passed a bill which allowed for the recovery of a portion of fixed costs to shift from volumetric rates to a separate fixed charge. And that fixed charge had to be income graduated, meaning it would be higher for non-low income customers. And so the California Commission started a proceeding to determine what these fixed charges would look like. And the proceeding, it became fairly contested as interveners weighed a number of different implementation issues, and there were dozens of fixed charge proposals. But ultimately, the California Commission settled on a three-tiered revenue-neutral design that you see here that starts at $6 per month for low-income customers and goes up to $24 per month for standard residential customers. $6 per month fixed charge will apply to approximately 30% of all investor-owned utility customers in California. And because of this fixed charge, the Commission was able to reduce the volumetric rates for residential customers by something like 5 to 7 cents, which they argued would improve the economics of adopting electric in-use technologies. And one other point on this rate design, there is no income verification required by the utility. So customer incomes are established, or customer eligibility is established through enrollment in existing assistance programs like CARE or FARA, or just through self-certification of income by the customer. And so to summarize, this rate design in California is really a case study in balancing objectives like affordability, simplicity, gradualism, and electrification. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we see another unique rate design to address affordability. In August 2024, the New York Commission approved the implementation of the Energy Affordability Guarantee Pilot. This pilot is really focused on the intersection of affordability and electrification. New York is pushing for decarbonization and electrification of residential buildings with technologies like heat pumps, but recognizes there's significant upfront investment and operating cost challenges with these systems. So to address this problem, the New York legislature directed the Commission to establish a program to provide an energy affordability guarantee to participating low to moderate income customers. And these customers have to electrify their homes in accordance with certain program standards. And the program itself provides approximately 1,000 households with what they call tailored bill assistance to ensure that electricity costs do not exceed 6% of a customer's annual income. And to be eligible for this program, customers, they must fully electrify their space and water heating through the Empower Plus program, which provides no cost or subsidized electrification upgrades for these low to moderate income households. But there is one thing to note with some of this program funding is it's coming from Inflation Reduction Act grants. So with the election results, that might be something to watch for in this program. But given the potential for increased energy burdens associated with operating heat pumps, the design of this pilot requires monitoring of each household's energy consumption and monthly cost, and then calculating their individual energy burdens and then applying those customized bill discounts based on those burdens. So these bill discounts are targeted to achieve a energy burden level of guaranteed for 15 years, which is the approximate useful life of a heat pump. So overall, this pilot aims to better understand how the economics of electrification for low-income customers, as well as what it takes to develop tailored bill assistance and the administrative complexity that comes with that. Next slide, please. And so the case studies we reviewed show how each rate design comes with its own unique policy objectives and trade-offs. For regulators, this means finding a balance between traditional goals like fairness, simplicity, and revenue sufficiency, and broader policy objectives. And with the energy landscape changing so rapidly, that balancing act is only getting more complicated. And the complexity highlights the fact that there is no one right answer when it comes to low-income rate design. And innovative and equitable rate design solutions are needed to balance these conflicting objectives. Next slide, please. And so to summarize, energy affordability is an increasingly important topic for utilities, stakeholders, and regulators. The changing energy landscape is placing significant upward pressure on rates. And as higher bills disproportionately impact low-income households, the energy industry is exploring rate design solutions that balance affordability and equity with broader policy objectives and traditional rate-making principles. So that wraps up my affordability presentation. Thank you all, and back to Kevin.
Hey, John, thanks very much. It's fascinating stuff, and really, I think affordability is one of those issues that we're all going to have to need to pay a lot of attention to in the coming years. Next up, I'd like to invite Tony Gonzalez, a partner in our Atlanta office, to share with us his insights and some of the recent developments at FERC. Tony, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Kevin, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tony Gonzalez, as Kevin mentioned, partner at ScottMadden, focused on transmission and distribution. On my bio here, it mentions my time at Georgia Power, where I spent several years working in a transmission control center. There I saw firsthand some of the challenges of managing a grid on real time and the importance of transmission planning on grid operations, which we're about to get into here now. Next slide. Let's begin the topic by discussing why transmission expansion has become so critical. There's a growing need for transmission systems to accommodate changing energy flows, new resources, aging infrastructure. Additionally, growing demand from sectors like data centers and manufacturing is increasing the strain on the grid, especially when combined with more frequent extreme weather events. However, the pace of change may exceed the industry's ability to keep up. Looking at this graph here, we see a trend in U.S. transmission line construction. In 2020, over 2,100 miles of transmission line were built, but by 2023, the number had gone down to just over 600. That's roughly a 71% decline. Another trend is the shift towards intra-regional projects, which focus on strengthening connections within individual regions. But there's a need for more inter-regional projects, those that cross state lines, to ensure we can move power across wider areas. Of U.S. projects completed from 2020 to 2023 that originated in ISO, 68 of those were intra-regional, while only 2 projects were inter-regional. Given that imbalance and the slowdown in transmission construction, it's easy to see why FERC decided to take action with Order 1920. Next slide. Let's look at the background of Order 1920. In April 2022, FERC initiated the docket to address the slow progress in transmission development and generator interconnections. The goal was to reform transmission planning process. A key concern for FERC was transmission planning wasn't forward-looking enough. It was too focused on the immediate needs and didn't adequately consider long-term energy trends. This apparent inefficiency led to fragmented development, where investments weren't always aligned with the grid's future needs and sometimes driving up costs. To address the issues, FERC issued Order 1920 in May of this year. Some of the targets of the order are straightforward. Identify long-term transmission needs, determine the factors influencing these needs, and consider a broader set of benefits. FERC views this as a significant step forward for transmission development and ensuring it can support the evolving energy needs. That said, and kind of hot off the presses, 2 weeks ago, in response to stakeholder feedback, FERC voted to approve Order 1920A, which enhances state regulator involvement in shaping future planning scenarios and cost allocation methods, which we'll get into in future slides. Next slide. Moving on to the specifics of the planning process, Order 1920, under Order 1920, one of the key provisions is that long-term planning must occur every 5 years. This ensures that we're consistently evaluating and addressing future transmission needs rather than just reacting to issues. Facilities selected in these planning cycles must be chosen within 3 years of the cycle start, and making the process more timely. Existing ITOs like MISO, PJM, and ISO New England are already conducting long-term studies. However, Order 1920 advocates for a more structured approach by requiring that each plan include 3 plausible, diverse long-term scenarios, basically having a few backup plans. This includes a sensitivity analysis taking into account high impact and low frequency events. The new Order 1928 introduces more flexibility in scenario development, clarifying that transmission providers can develop additional scenarios if relevant state entities, regulators, request them. Additionally, and here to the right, the 7 categories of factors must be considered when assessing transmission needs. FERC believes this approach will help ensure that the planning process accounts for potential challenges and long-term needs. Next slide. Order 1920 lays out a detailed process for evaluating long-term transmission facilities. The first step in the process is to create clear criteria for selecting projects and ensure that state authorities are involved in the decision-making. This is crucial to get alignment on both the state and federal levels. In Order 1920, the evaluation must consider a range of economic and reliability benefits, at least the 7 specific areas to the right, ensuring that projects bring value to the grid and to consumers. The process must be transparent and non-discriminatory, meaning it should be fair and aimed to maximizing benefits without leading to overbuilding. However, under Order 1920A, the 7 benefit categories just mentioned are no longer mandated, though the identification of long-term transmission needs should still be based on economic and reliability drivers. 2 more important features in the order are that it specifies when proposals for transmission facilities will be accepted, including for those of non-incumbent providers, and that robust cost-benefit analyses will be required to assess proposed facilities. Next slide. A key part of the Order 1920 is its focus on grid enhancing technologies, or GETs. As an engineer, this might be the favorite part of the order. These are advanced technologies that improve the efficiency, flexibility, reliability of the grid without requiring major infrastructure changes or major costs. As the yellow icons show in this graphic, GETs can include solutions like dynamic line ratings and advanced power flow control, which help utilities better manage transmission capacity. These technologies can alleviate congestion and improve overall performance of the grid, especially in regions where building transmission is sometimes difficult, expensive, or just can take too long. In 2024, several states, including Virginia, Maine, Minnesota, and New York, are actively assessing the potential use of GETs, and other states like Connecticut and New Hampshire are considering initiating studies for these technologies. This represents a growing recognition on the value of GETs for optimizing grid's performance. Moving to the next slide. Thank you. Now, about cost. Let's address the issue of cost allocation for regional transmission projects. Order 1920 required a one-time 6-month engagement period for states to negotiate cost allocation methodologies. However, in Order 1920A, it extends this engagement period by 6 months if the states need more time, with corresponding extensions to compliance deadlines. While Order 1920 did not mandate the states agree on how to allocate costs, Order 1920A requires that transmission providers include cost allocation methods in their compliance filings that states have agreed upon, even if it's not being proposed. If states cannot reach an agreement, FERC does provide a fallback mechanism with ex-ante methods. This ensures, the FERC views this as ensuring that even if states can't come to a consensus, there's still a fair and efficient way to allocate costs for regional projects. However, there is a concern that this could lead to costs being shared across states in a way that doesn't quite align with individual state policies. FERC also has the authority to intervene if a state agreements are deemed unreasonable or discriminatory. There's some concerns there as well, particularly among state regulators who are concerned about losing control over cost and how costs are being distributed. The debate over the role of state versus federal authority will likely continue as the industry adapts to these changes. Next slide. So to wrap up, let's review a few key takeaways. FERC has been actively pursuing transmission reform for years due to concerns about the pace of transmission development. Order 1920 represents the first major rule change in this arena since Order 1000, roughly 14 years ago, including structured long-term planning, diverse scenarios, cost allocation methods, timely decision-making, and the role of GETs. While the order is a step forward, there will likely be continued debate over the balance of federal and state authority, particularly around cost allocation. Order 1920A strengthens the state's involvement, allowing states to play a greater role in shaping transmission planning scenarios and cost allocation methods. Order 1920A also extends the timeline for the first planning cycle to start within 2 years of compliance filings rather than 1 in 1920. Giving providers more time to align their existing planning cycles. Additionally, the increasing use of GETs like DLRs and advanced power flow control could play a significant role in developing the transmission system. Well, that concludes my topic for today, and I look forward to questions in a little bit, and I'll turn it back to Kevin for the next topic. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Tony. Certainly some interesting developments, recently at FERC. I guess we'll wait and see how impactful those prove to be in the coming years. Next up, I'd like to invite Katie Davis. Katie's a manager out of Philadelphia. Katie's going to update us on the state of long duration storage. Katie, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Katie Davis. You can go to the next slide, please. I'm a manager in our energy practice, and I'm largely interested in transmission and distribution infrastructure, as well as system implementation planning. Next slide, please. So long duration storage is typically defined as technologies that are capable of providing more than 10 hours of energy discharge. And we've seen a variety of technologies emerge that are capable of this duration. However, they're at varying levels of market readiness. So this graph is a great overview of the battery storage landscape. And along the x-axis, we have discharge duration ranging from 6 hours to months. And in our discussion, we'll be really focusing in on that 10-hour to 5-day range in the middle. And that's where storage systems are able to provide not only intraday reliability, but also multi-day benefits. On the y-axis, you see that we have technology readiness levels. And we want technologies to be able to achieve commercial readiness, and that way it can be deployed and sustained cost effectively in the market. Now, as you can see from all the colors, we have a wide range of technologies, with the darker shades are representing the intended duration of each of those individual technologies. So at the top of the chart, an example of a mature technology I'm sure we've all heard of is pumped hydro. It's been around for a while. It's very established in the market. In contrast, another technology that we've likely all heard of is hydrogen, a chemical technology that you see towards the bottom right of the graph. And hydrogen is much more applicable to seasonal shifts, and it's getting a lot of attention for a lot of the demonstration projects that are currently ongoing. So as you can see, the long duration storage landscape is still relatively young. And over the next few slides, we're really going to hone in on the benefits of that 10-hour to multi-zone range, as well as what long duration storage needs in order to continue to see market growth. Next slide, please. So we'll use California as an example to walk through the benefits of long duration storage in the market. And that's particularly when supporting decarbonization goals. And that's because of 1, it's integrating higher penetrations of renewables, 2, displacing a higher capacity of fossil fuel generation, and 3, providing intra and multi-day reliability. Now, California has a state law that aims to generate 100% of the state's electricity from renewable and zero carbon resources by 2045. To walk you through the graph, across our x-axis, we have 2045 scenarios to achieve the state's goals. So the baseline scenario does retain natural gas, and you see that to the left, for reliability reasons. In the middle scenario, it achieves a strict no in-state combustion, but includes long duration storage in that resource portfolio. And then to the right, we see no in-state combustion, but also no long duration storage as a solution. The bars are going to represent the 2045 resource capacity in order to meet 2045 demand forecasts. And the black diamonds are the cost of each of these scenarios. Now, we want to focus on that middle scenario and the benefits of including long duration storage in the 2045 capacity. So 1, enabling a higher penetration of renewables. Now, in California, with the increase of solar and wind deployment, there's also been an increase in the amount of curtailments. And that's meaning that a portion of the renewable energy generated is wasted. Multi-day long duration storage is well suited to reduce curtailments because it can store the excess power and be able to shift that renewable discharge to periods where wind and solar generation are low, at nighttime, for example. This allows us to use our resource capacity more efficiently, and we don't have to overbuild to achieve state decarbonization goals. So when we compare the middle scenario with long duration storage to the right scenario without long duration storage, this analysis estimates that we would have to double our investment, and we'd have to build significantly more renewable capacity in order to meet 2045 demands if we don't include long duration storage. 2, displacing fossil fuels. So we see the baseline scenario to the left, natural gas is retained for reliability reasons. And this is because with the variability of renewables, you need capacity to balance the system. And in California, natural gas is a cheap, abundant resource that is readily dispatchable. But storage is also a readily dispatchable resource, and long duration storage expands that availability to balance the grid in a comparable manner. So in this analysis, comparing the baseline scenario with long duration storage in the middle scenario, this analysis estimates that long duration storage can be a cost-effective substitute for gas-fueled power plants capacity by 2045. And 3, providing intra and multi-day reliability. So we've talked about the balancing reliability because of variability of renewable energy throughout the day, but there's also an increased importance of multi-day reliability, and that's being driven by renewable lulls and extreme weather. And we're seeing extreme weather all across the country. That's not unique to California. And with long duration storage, you can have multi-day islanding and even microgrids during storm events. And this really helps us build out the resiliency of the grid. So again, that middle scenario is showing that there's just a benefit of having a mix of battery durations in order to optimize the system. Next slide, please. Great. So we see its value in our generation mix, but what's our current status of deployment? Well, the past few years, an overwhelmingly large majority of deployed storage has actually been 4 hours or less. And as you can see by the orange in the graph, that there's been very little long duration storage deployed recently. However, we are seeing some exciting catalysts in the long duration space that might make this a bit of an inflection point. And that's first thinking about innovation. So we saw on the first slide just a variety of technologies at different market readiness levels. And so there's a lot of really interesting and innovative companies working in this space. For example, I'm very excited about like Noon Energy, who's developing a carbon oxygen battery that's based on technology that was used on NASA's Mars Perseverance rover. So that's fascinating. And if this technology is successful, by using an abundant resource like carbon dioxide, this battery could be significantly cheaper than other technologies, which would be a huge breakthrough. 2, we're seeing investment. With long duration storage, it's attracting public and private funding. So the DOE has dedicated over $500 million in bipartisan infrastructure law funding towards the advancement of long duration storage research and deployment. Another really cool startup to keep on your radar is Form Energy. They're making a lot of waves with their utility partnerships, and they also recently raised $405 million in private funding earlier this year. And then third, regulatory commitments. So long duration storage is gaining attention at federal and state levels. So we mentioned the ongoing DOE grants, but also at the state level, New York State and California have both set long duration storage procurement targets and have dedicated research funding carve-outs. However, the big question is still, is this enough? So currently there's only about 23 gigawatts of long duration storage that's deployed on our grid today. And with over 95% of that being pumped hydro, and again, from the graph, not a lot in the most recent years. However, the DOE estimates that the US grid may need 225 to 460 gigawatts by 2050 to support a net zero economy. So you see that there's still a lot of opportunity to grow, and we still have a long way to go. Next slide, please. So if it takes innovation, investment, and regulatory commitment in order to spur the market, what will it take for the long duration storage market to lift off? Now, DOE coined this phrase as part of their technology deep dive series, and it's meaning when a technology becomes largely self-sustaining so that it doesn't need a significant level of public capital, that's when the technology would have achieved liftoff. For long duration storage, those key objectives would be 1, demonstrating technology performance. So we've talked a lot about the cool innovation, all the different technologies, but it's really proving these technologies in the market and at scale. And achieving scale will really depend on driving down that technology cost curve. And there likely won't be a single technology that wins the market. I mean, there's a benefit of having a variety of technologies with unique characteristics and capabilities. So that's thinking like a variety of raw materials, a variety of duration capabilities. 2, securing resource adequacy compensation. So we need to properly value long duration storage for its dual role for grid services and for generation. And that's in order to put the right market and regulatory mechanisms in place. Now, long duration storage has a different value proposition than lithium ion batteries. So the markets need to evolve to think about how we integrate batteries beyond just intraday energy arbitrage or short-term services, and how we can value the benefits of multi-day reliability. And it's not just on the market side. Storage valuation also needs to be properly modeled in integrated resource planning. So that needs to be reflected in our resource adequacy studies as well as our transmission planning. And lastly, developing supply chain capabilities. So there's a few ways to think about how we can build up these capabilities to sustain the market. And that's first, we can be thinking about supply chain of raw materials, and whether that's developing technologies with materials in abundance or materials that don't depend on foreign supply chains. But that's also thinking about the supply chain capabilities from a workforce development perspective. We need to be creating jobs and training in order to support manufacturing and operations in order for this market to achieve scale. Next slide, please. In summary, so we defined long duration storage as capable of providing 10+ hours of discharge. And there are a variety of technologies at different levels of maturity. And even as this market evolves, we'll likely see a variety of technology solutions. We then walked through the California's 2045 scenarios and how long duration storage can be a cost-effective option for a decarbonized grid. And that's not only because it complements the expansion of renewables, but also because long duration can provide grid reliability and resiliency for extended periods of time. However, we did acknowledge that right now there's been little long duration storage installed in the past few years, and lithium ion is about 90% of that storage deployed, so dominating that space. But there is a lot to be excited about. We highlighted Forum Energy for their recent fundraising, but they also just announced the expansion of their manufacturing facility in West Virginia. They now have committed over 14 gigawatt hours in projects and partnerships, and they recently broke ground on their first project in Minnesota, which is expected to come online next year. So that's just Forum Energy. That's one startup, and that's hopefully a glimpse of the broader industry momentum. However, we discussed that there are still barriers to overcome to be well established in this market. The milestones to achieve scale are going to need support all across the industry. So that's thinking regulators, developers, market organizers, resource planners, manufacturers, you name it. So first step we can all take is evolving our tools and valuation frameworks and really thinking about what the benefits of long duration storage are as a solution in our generation and infrastructure portfolios. And with that, I will hand it back to Kevin.
Well, great, Katie. That was terrific information. It really sounds like with long duration, it's really a matter of when and not if, assuming all the pieces line up. So if I can welcome our other panelists back on camera, probably no surprise, we've gotten a couple questions, and so we're just kind of launch into the Q&A. The first one we got in is for you, Jon, on the affordability topic. And the question we got in is kind of regarding this. I think you said something about it, there's really not a perfect solution to affordability. So the question is, in your opinion, what's the practicality of these complex subsidy programs for low-income customers? The commenter said someone still has to pay. Would a simple tiered pricing based on energy consumption be easier to administer? And are there any examples of those successful simple tiered pricing models based on consumption?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I think there's a couple questions here. So in terms of the administrative simplicity, a flat discount would certainly be the least complex. Tiered rate designs are slightly more difficult to administer, and the complexity depends on how many tiers you're using, as well as what data sharing agreements you have in place for a given state. And then you kind of move across the spectrum to more advanced rate designs like PIP. You're creating separate billing and payment arrangements for each participating customer, which can add significant complexity. I would caution against saying any of these rate designs are easy to administer, though. The ease of administration really depends on the jurisdiction and what data sharing agreements are in place, the level of funding available, and the billing infrastructure at the utility. But going back to whether a simple tiered price rate design can be successful, I think it depends on how you measure that success. So a flat or a tiered discount program, it's going to reduce the energy burden for some customers. So in that sense, it does provide meaningful improvements to affordability. And there's industry examples of some of these more simple tiered designs like 2-tiered discounts. The problem is they don't always provide targeted relief for eligible customers. So some customers underpay relative to their energy burden and some overpay. And then for some of those more simple flat or tiered designs, you may have problems with what's called the eligibility cliff, where some customers may lose access to a discount when their income is slightly above a defined level. So the more complex tiered discounts or PIP programs do a better job of managing that. But just to get back to the overall question, the practicality of more complex designs depends on the objectives that the utility and regulator are trying to accomplish, particularly in regards to how targeted that rate relief should be, and then balancing those objectives with the administrative and capital resources available.
Yeah, it makes sense. Simplicity doesn't come to mind when we talk about any of these topics. Tony, another question came in that I'm I'll hand to you kind of on FERC, particularly around 1920. I think you referenced 1920A, which I think just came out maybe in the last week or two as a subsequent or an amendment to 1920. It makes changes, as I understand it, but how does 1920A enhance state involvement in the long-term transmission planning process?
Yeah, the state involvement, it pretty much formalizes or tries to formalize how we integrate the perspectives of transmission scenario development from the states. It requires more collaboration with the transmission providers and the state regulators. This couple of things that it benefits, that ensuring that the planning scenarios reflects the state's needs, some specific laws or policies, or, quite frankly, some renewable energy objectives. As I mentioned earlier, the order does mandate that state agreed upon cost allocation methods are included in the filings, compliance filings, even if they're not being proposed by the provider. But that also increases the transparency, right? So we get to see what was being talked about behind the scenes. Overall increasing the state input facilitates a better balance between the state and the federal authorities. It promotes, a transmission system is not only, or at least it attempts to promote a transmission that's not only efficient, but reliable and tailored to the individual state's needs, especially when you are crossing states. It offers flexibility as well. The flexibility that I talked about earlier, when instead of having to do 3 plans, you could have as many plans, especially if it's asked about or is asked from the state regulators. So kind of gives you a lot more, overall, it gives the states a lot more ability to contribute and be a part of the process.
Got it, makes sense. Katie, the next question we have is for you around the storage question. And the issue is, the question from the asker was, how do you foresee lithium-ion pricing declines impacting other emerging long-duration energy storage technologies such as liquid air or form? And maybe a follow-on question is lithium-ion already the winner for 10-hour applications, particularly later in the 2020s?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially because we talked about lithium ion being so dominant in the storage space already. Now, it's largely going to come down to economics, and that's with any technology rising to the top of the market. And that's really how you balance their cost per unit energy with other battery designs. So whether that be like energy capacity, round trip efficiency. So the 4 to 6 hour window has really been optimized for lithium ion batteries because that's really where their energy capacity and their cost per kilowatt hour are optimized. We are seeing technology advancements that are maybe extending, but if you think much longer beyond that 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 hour window for lithium ions, it just really doesn't seem like it's going to be economical. And that's largely because the cost curve of lithium ion is linear. So as you're incrementally increasing your battery, you're really not gaining a lot of efficiencies with lithium ions. Whereas other long duration technologies, we're very much looking for materials that can increase the duration at a marginal cost. So kind of, again, even just thinking like pumped hydro, just with that size of being able to achieve economies of scale that you can't with a lithium ion. So again, it's really going to come down to balancing the economics with the design. And that's why we don't really see lithium ion extending that duration. However, as we kind of talked about, there will always be a place for lithium ion in the market space because they've dominated that 4 to 6. I just don't see as a technology that being the winner for longer durations beyond 8 hours.
Interesting. So the economics there drive some of this decision making, it sounds like.
Yeah.
You're kind of building on that. We've got another question that kind of relates to that a little bit. If we move away from renewables, or if there's less emphasis on renewables going forward, and we move to more thermal or nuclear kind of traditional generation, The question is asking, how does long duration fit into that picture, particularly given your California example?
Yeah. So again, it's going to come back to economics and what we can do for long duration storage to be able to bring down that technology cost curve. And again, that's kind of comparing it to any technology, and it's just how it can be cost effective in the marketplace. And so thinking how we can drive down that cost curve, there's a few angles you can look at it from. One kind of being technology, thinking not even improving the technology, but how can we make the technology more efficient and optimize that battery design in order to be able to compete. That'll drive down that cost. Also thinking about manufacturing and how we can improve and have more consistent manufacturing. Then as well as like supply chain, also kind of having a stable supply chain will help drive down those costs. But all of this is going to take economies of scale. So that's kind of where the balance happens on how we can get long duration storage to be able to compete with just in the market and to be cost effective is really if we can achieve economies of scale. And that's why right now we're seeing so much investment in R&D in this space, because they really go hand in hand in order to be able to achieve that scale. So again, it's not necessarily how can you compare long duration storage to a particular competing technology. It's more of how can it be cost effective in your portfolio and enhance other aspects of it.
Interesting. So there'll be a place for that kind of regardless the way we see it in the future. Yeah,
yep.
Makes sense. We've got another question here on affordability, Jon. This one deals with revenue shortfall. So the question is, how should revenue shortfall associated with energy affordability programs be recovered from customers?
Thanks, Kevin. So this may be a theme for my presentation, but just like there's no one right solution for rate design, there's also no one right solution for low-income cost recovery related to these rate designs. So I've seen a couple of different methods to recover the revenue shortfall associated with these programs. Each method comes with trade-offs. Most programs I've seen either use some sort of rider or adjustment factor to recover costs across customer classes. Some also include estimated revenue deficiency and base rates and have some sort of annual true-up mechanism. But there's some other examples as well. I've seen some examples of statewide funding. I think New Hampshire has a statewide systems benefit charge, and the revenue is used or provides utilities to offset the discounts and also provide the community action organizations that administer the programs. And then some other programs use other methods like shareholder funding and voluntary contributions from customers, but those are always complemented with some other cost recovery tools. So each of these methods, cost recovery methods, comes with trade-offs. From what I've seen, utilities typically conduct some sort of bill impact analysis or stakeholder consultation during the approval process of a rate design to determine which cost recovery method best balances cross-subsidization with concerns around the need for affordability.
So it sounds like a lot of issues to detangle there. And I think during your presentation, you mentioned eligibility, and some of those eligibility requirements also seem to be equally challenging.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the eligibility can depend on obviously your income level, but defining what income level should be eligible for a low income rate design can be tricky. We've typically seen a threshold around 150% of federal poverty level. That's some jurisdictions have pushed that to 200% of the federal poverty level. And then for eligibility, we've also seen categorical eligibility where customers that are already in like LIHEAP, for example, are automatically placed in a low income rate design. And then there's some more novel approaches to eligibility around your location as well. I've seen that proposed but not approved. But yeah, there's always trade-offs with, especially when you're in the rates and regulatory space.
Sure, makes sense. Tony, we've got another question here, and this might be our last one. We've got another one here on grid enhancing technologies, which you brought up in your presentation. The question is, how do grid enhancing technologies compare to traditional wires-focused transmission upgrades in terms of cost effectiveness? What's the assumption there?
So I brought up two examples in the presentation, the DLRs and advanced power flow control. First, I'll explain a little bit about what they are. DLR is a technology that allows transmission operators, like I used to be, to continuously monitor and adjust for allowable capacity on transmission lines in real time. It does that in an environment with conditions that can change temperature, wind speeds, and solar, and that's typically not easy to do without this type of technology. DLRs allow for increased power flow because you have better visibility. The advanced power flow control involves the use of technology that dynamically changes the flow of managing the grid. So it optimizes the distribution and it looks to prevent bottlenecks. Mm-hmm. Both of those have the same things some things in common with other GETs, which generally are more cost effective than traditional and more expensive upgrades. The traditional upgrades often involve building a lot more infrastructure, which, like I said a moment ago, can cost a lot, but usually take a lot more time to build. GETs do get to optimize the grid in a quicker fashion than the longer term new construction. This makes it more flexible transmission option for build out, but it doesn't necessarily replace the need for new construction particularly when addressing long-term capacity challenges.
It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to watch and see how those are deployed. Well, with that, I think we're just about out of time. We're getting close to the top of the hour. I just want to thank my panelists once again for taking the time to share your insights and your thoughts with us today. I thought some really interesting perspectives, and I'll be curious, as I've kind of said throughout, I'll be curious to see how some of these turn out in the years to come. If you would like to take a deeper dive on any of the topics we covered today or any of the others that were in this fall's edition of the Energy Industry Update, the link is here on the screen, as well as a QR code. Feel free to take a picture of that and follow that link and get a copy of the full report. And I think with that, PJ, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, panel. Fantastic presentation. For our audience, we hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. As you log off, please take a moment to complete our survey and give us your feedback so that we can continue to provide you with quality content. Thank you for attending, and this does conclude today's presentation.